Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. So now guys, this is one of at least 3 videos that I am going to be doing on this topic. So if you are not subscribed already, then please subscribe, because I am going to be releasing at least 3 videos over the next 24 hours or so on this particular topic. And also, whilst you are on the channel, go into the comment section and tell me off for continually being alarmed and surprised at the goings on in Nigeria, because nothing in Nigeria really should surprise or alarm anyone. But guys, I continue to be surprised and alarmed as guys I bring you this. Orji Kalu released from prison. So this is Orji Kalu. Of course, we've done videos on this guy plentifully in the last few months or so. A guy that at last, after having governed the state for I think 2 terms, for about 8 years, several years ago, this guy has been in the courts for year on year. So finally now the courts have come to a decision on his corrupt practices, and they have sent him to Kirikiri. That was about 3-4 months ago, and not 3-4 months later, this guy is already out. So that is my surprise. The headline again: Orji Kalu released from prison. So now let's see now how this is being justified. Orji Kalu, a Nigerian senator who was jailed for allegedly stealing public funds, has been released from custody. Mr. Kanu, a former Abia state governor, was freed from the Nigerian correctional facility in Kuje, Abuja on Friday morning. 2 sources familiar with the development said he has now moved to his residence off Queen Amina Street within the parameters of Aso Rock Presidential Villa. So already that's another, in fact, I have to pause there. So it is quite apt, and it's quite, I'm not going to, it's not ironic, but apt is the word. It is quite apt that this guy will be a convicted corrupt politician, will be living within the parameters of Aso Rock, because where else will a corrupt politician in Nigeria live other than within the parameters of Aso Rock? After all, the parameters of Aso Rock is the residence of Nigerian corruption. So we take it from the top again. He has now moved to his residence of Queen Amina Street within the parameters of Aso Rock Presidential Villa, sources said. The sources spoke under anonymity because they were close to Mr. Orji and did not get immediate permission from him to disclose his release to the press. Mr. Kalu's release came moments after the Supreme Court voided his conviction in December 2019 in a multi-billion naira corruption trial. Mr. Kalu had been accused of pilfering and mismanaging funds belonging to Abia State during his days as governor between 1999 and 2007. So he did serve 2 terms. He pleaded not guilty and appealed his conviction by the Lagos Division of the Federal High Court. On Friday morning, the Supreme Court deemed Mr. Kalu's conviction inappropriate and ordered a retrial of the case, according to multiple media reports out of the court. A 7-member panel of the Apex Court, in a unanimous verdict delivered by Justice Ijembi Eko, declared that the conviction is null and void, Channels Television reported on Friday. According to the report, Justice Eko declared that Justice Mohammed Idris, who convicted Mr. Kalu, was already a justice of the Court of Appeal when he ruled and sentenced Mr. Kalu and his co-defendant. He held that a justice of the Court of Appeal cannot operate as a judge of the Federal High Court, and ordered the Chief Justice of the Federal High Court to reassign the case for trial, the report stated. So now this is now, so you just have to listen to that again. Maybe you should scroll back and re-listen, because it befuddles the mind. This scrambles the brain cannot compute. So the reason why they are releasing this guy, this Orji Kalu guy, is not because he is not guilty of the charges leveled against him. It's not because there was an anomaly in the trial or the verdict of the judge was inappropriate and it does not tie with the evidence or what was presented in court. No, it was not for all of those reasons. The reason, in case you are not clear, let me read it again and then we'll discuss it. He held that a justice of the Court of Appeal cannot operate as a judge of the Federal High Court and ordered the Chief Justice of the Federal High Court to reassign the case for trial. So what they are saying in effect, because the person that gave the verdict in the Kalu original trial was a Justice Mohammed Idris. So now this Justice Mohammed Idris had been the judge sitting on this case all the way through, at least for a good number of time. So now in the course of this Justice Idris sitting on this case for all of that period that he had been sitting on that case, he was then elevated and promoted from being a Federal High Court judge to an appeal court judge. So an upgrade in his career, a movement upwards in the legal structures. So he was upgraded to the Court of Appeal. So he was upgraded to the Court of Appeal, but he had been sitting in judgment on this case, a case that he is fully familiar with all the way through. So he has then stepped back from the Court of Appeal to come and sit in judgment to give a final verdict on this case that he has been sitting in judgment on all the way through. So this is what he did, and he would have done that, of course, with the direction and approval of all of the appropriate bodies that should direct and approve that. So he has now gone back to the High Court to sit in judgment over this case that he has been following all the way through and give a verdict. So he did that and then carried on as a Court of Appeal judge. So what the Supreme Court are saying, because we have to be clear, according to the report, Justice Eko declared that Justice Mohammed Idris, who convicted Mr. Kalu, was already a justice of the Court of Appeal when he ruled and sentenced Mr. Kalu and his co-defendant. He held that a justice of the Court of Appeal cannot operate as a judge of the Federal High Court. So we're clear on that. What they are saying in effect, and the whole reason why they have now let this guy again get away with mass looting of the Abia State Treasury for 8 solid years. So they're not saying that he did not loot. They're not saying that there was something that failed in the way that the case was presented by the EFCC or their lawyers or the people of Abia State. They're not saying that the money is not missing. What they are saying is this judge was already promoted and it then came down to a lower status, a status that he had held, by the way, for several years. So they are now saying he came back to give that judgment, and that was the reason then that they are now decided to vacate that judgment. They are vacating that judgment because this guy that sat in judgment was already elevated to the Supreme Court. So where is the logic in that is really where my question is. Because one, if this guy, this Justice Mohammed Idris, was sitting on that case all the way through, who else is best placed to give a judgment on that case? It is, of course, Justice Idris. So if Justice Idris had been sitting on that case and it been elevated, is it not even infinite sense for him to then come back and make that judgment? Is he no longer competent to sit in judgment on that case, having now been elevated to a higher status? Is that the reasoning? There is no logic to that. So what is the reason? They are saying he vacated his seat and he came back to sit in judgment. Is he competent to make that judgment? Yes. Is he familiar with the details of the case? Yes. And is the verdict that he gave in compliance with the case that was presented to him by the party that was prosecuting? Yes. So where is the wrongdoing and who has been done wrong? So whose interest exactly is this serving? Look how woolly and feeble and just very weak these excuses that a judge that is competent has sat on a case that is familiar with, and you are saying because that judge has been elevated, is not retired, by the way, this Justice Idris, they're not saying he's retired from the bench, he's not a retired judge, he's a judge that has been elevated. You know, I mean, the brain cannot compute. You know, the brain cannot compute the logic of the or the reasoning behind this. But then, of course, that is Nigeria. Perhaps that is law, and I am not familiar with it. But if it is law, it is certainly not sense. Conversations in the comment section, boju boju, abracadabra. We all knew that the guy was going to get away with it, and get away with it he has. So no matter how much return, look how long it took them to bring this guy to trial. How many years, how many appeals and appeals. So they are going to go through all that process again, and by the time again they come to a verdict on this guy, he would no longer be of this world, because we're talking another 30, 40 years, 50 years. God grant him long life, but the guy is not going to live forever, but that money is gone. So that's the Nigerian system for you. Come tell me what you are making of it in the comment section. But before you do that, click on the red subscribe button so it turns gray. The bell button notifies you every time I drop a new video. Then come tell me if you have always been of the sense that this Orji Kalu was always going to get away with it, because this was always my reading all the way through. I'm even surprised that they had the effrontery to sentence him in the first place, because this guy knows too much and there are too many of them with their hands in the till. So they were always going to let him go, and let him go they have. So let's discuss all this in the comment section. So I'll leave you here. Carry this conversation on with you in the comment section, but here I say peace.